When I say that this speech will change how you see your struggles, I'm not saying it to hype you up or to make a dramatic promise. I'm saying it because most of what we've been taught about struggle is quietly wrong, and those wrong ideas have been shaping how you think about yourself for years. They've been shaping how you interpret pain, delay, failure, and effort, and because of that, they've been making your life heavier than it needs to be. Right now, if you're struggling, there's a strong chance you believe something is wrong with you. You think you're behind, you think you missed some invisible deadline everyone else managed to meet. You scroll through other people's lives and conclude, consciously or unconsciously, that they figured out something you didn't. And the most dangerous part isn't the struggle itself, it's the meaning you attach to it. We've been conditioned to treat struggle as evidence that we're not talented enough, evidence that we're not disciplined enough, evidence that we chose the wrong path. But struggle is not evidence of inadequacy, it is evidence of engagement. It is what happens when a human being is actually inside the process of becoming something more than they currently are. Think about how backwards this conditioning really is. If you go to the gym for the first time and your muscles burn, you don't think, "This pain means my body is broken." You understand instinctively that the discomfort is a signal of adaptation. But when it comes to emotional, psychological, or existential discomfort, we flip that logic entirely. We assume pain means we're failing at life. What if the opposite is true? What if the presence of struggle means you are finally in contact with the edge of your capacity? What if the confusion you feel is not a flaw, but a sign that your old mental models are no longer sufficient for the life you're trying to build? Most people don't suffer because life is hard. They suffer because they expect it not to be. They suffer because no one prepared them for the internal friction that comes with growth. So when friction appears, they panic, they personalize it, they start negotiating with reality instead of learning how to work with it. Here's a hard truth that is also incredibly freeing. Clarity usually comes after action, not before it. We're taught to wait until we feel confident, until we feel certain, until we feel ready. But readiness is not a feeling. It's a byproduct, and struggle is often the price of admission. When you're in the middle of a hard season, your brain is constantly asking one question: how do I make this stop? But a better question is, what is this trying to teach me? Not in a vague, motivational way, but in a very practical sense. What skill is being demanded of you that you haven't fully developed yet? What illusion is being challenged? What identity is no longer sustainable? Struggle often appears at the exact moment your old strategies stop working. And instead of seeing that as a catastrophe, you can see it as a signal that you've outgrown the version of yourself that relied on those strategies. The discomfort is the transition period. This is where psychology and philosophy quietly agree. From a psychological perspective, growth requires stress. From a philosophical perspective, meaning emerges through responsibility and engagement with difficulty. The problem is not struggle. The problem is our refusal to stop interpreting struggle as a verdict on our worth. Let me say this clearly: your struggle is not a character flaw. It is not a personal failure. It is not proof that you're weak. In many cases, it's proof that you're attempting something honest. We romanticize outcomes and ignore processes. We celebrate confidence but skip the years of doubt that created it. We admire discipline but ignore the internal chaos it took to build structure. And then we punish ourselves for not being instantly composed in moments that are inherently destabilizing. There is a quiet arrogance in believing you should be exempt from difficulty while attempting something meaningful. And there is a deep humility in accepting that struggle is part of the contract. Another thing we misunderstand is the emotional texture of progress. Progress does not feel like progress when you're inside it. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like repetition. It feels like effort without immediate reward. If it felt good all the time, everyone would do it. Your brain is wired to conserve energy and avoid uncertainty. Growth demands both energy and uncertainty. So of course there is resistance. Of course there is friction. The presence of resistance does not mean you're on the wrong path. Often it means you're finally on a path that requires something from you. We also need to talk about comparison, because it quietly distorts how you experience struggle. You are comparing your internal experience to other people's external presentation. You are comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel, and then you're using that distorted comparison as proof that you're failing. You don't see their doubt. You don't see their stalled moments. You don't see the nights where nothing made sense, but those moments exist for everyone who has built something real. The danger of comparison isn't just that it makes you feel bad, it makes you misinterpret your own experience. It convinces you that struggle is abnormal, when in fact it is universal. Another layer to this is identity. Many people suffer not because the work is hard, but because the work threatens who they think they are. Growth often requires you to let go of an old self-image, and that feels like loss, even if the new version of you is stronger, more capable, and more aligned. Struggle is often grief in disguise. Grief for the simplicity you no longer have. Grief for the certainty you outgrew. Grief for the version of you that didn't know what they know now. And instead of acknowledging that grief, we label it as weakness. But grief is not weakness. It is the psychological cost of change. Here's something most people don't realize until much later. The goal is not to eliminate struggle. The goal is to become someone who can carry it without collapsing. Strength is not the absence of difficulty. It is the capacity to remain coherent in the presence of it. This reframing changes everything. Instead of asking, "When will this end?" you start asking, "Who am I becoming while this continues?" Instead of trying to escape discomfort, you start learning how to move through it intelligently. You stop waiting for motivation and start building systems. You stop waiting to feel confident and start acting competently. You stop treating discomfort as an emergency and start treating it as information. And slowly, something shifts. The struggle doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes less personal, less threatening. You begin to trust yourself inside difficulty, and that trust is far more valuable than temporary comfort. One of the most damaging myths is that strong people don't struggle. Strong people struggle differently. They don't interpret struggle as a stop sign. They interpret it as feedback. They understand that emotional pain is not the same as danger. That fear does not always mean stop. That doubt does not mean you're incapable. Often, it means you're at the edge of something meaningful. There is also a moral dimension to this. When you avoid struggle, you often avoid responsibility. And when you avoid responsibility, life shrinks. Meaning does not come from ease. It comes from voluntarily taking on something difficult and learning how to carry it. You don't become confident by waiting for confidence. You become confident by surviving moments where you had none. You don't develop resilience by avoiding stress. You develop it by staying present when stress arrives. This is why trying to be comfortable all the time quietly erodes your sense of self. Comfort feels good in the short term, but it robs you of the evidence that you can endure. Your struggle is building evidence, evidence that you can think under pressure, evidence that you can adapt, evidence that you can continue even when the outcome is unclear. And once you see it that way, you stop asking for life to be easier. You start asking to be stronger, clearer, and more disciplined. Not disciplined in a harsh, self-punishing way, but in a respectful way. The kind of discipline that says, "I will show up even when I don't feel like it, because my future self is watching." The irony is that when you stop fighting the existence of struggle, it becomes more manageable. Much of the pain comes from resistance, from the internal argument that says, "This shouldn't be happening." When you drop that argument, you free up energy. Energy you can use to solve problems, to learn, to adjust. Life is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be honest. Honest about what's hard. Honest about what you don't know yet. Honest about the effort required to become who you want to be. Struggle is the conversation between who you are and who you're becoming. If you listen instead of panic, it will teach you. And here's the quiet conclusion that most people miss. The people you admire did not eliminate struggle from their lives. They redefined their relationship with it. They stopped seeing it as a sign to quit and started seeing it as part of the process. They stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What is required of me now?" If you take nothing else from this, take this with you. Your struggle is not in the way of your growth. It is the way. So the next time things feel heavy, unclear, or uncomfortable, don't immediately assume you're failing. Pause, ask better questions, stay engaged. Because the moment you stop treating struggle as an enemy, it becomes one of your greatest teachers. And the life you're trying to build on the other side of it will demand that you learned its lessons well.